In this video, we're going to put our CSS grid skills to work by creating a responsive photo image gallery. And so what I've done here is started to create I've created a HTML page that has all of my images in it. I'm using divs here in this example because I'm going to give my div and my wrapper background colors so you can see exactly what's happening. You don't have to have the divs, but by putting background colors to it, it helps me better demonstrate the way that this example is working. So right now you can see that I have a background color of light yellow. Let's see. No, you can't. Let me refresh this. And so my wrapper is light yellow. And if I uncomment my div, you should see that the light blue takes effect because that div is taking up, each of these divs is taking up the full amount of space. So you can't see the wrapper behind it, but the wrapper does have a light yellow. And so now I'm going to close out this gallery because we don't need it now that we've got it set up. And so first thing we need to do is we need to give the parent of these divs a display of grid so that we can start to implement our grid stylings. Okay, nothing is happening right off the bat. So now let's first define some columns. So let's put all of these dogs we'll start off with 3 columns. And so that would be grid template columns. And we're going to do 3 columns and we're going to do 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR. And remember that FR is just a fractional. So it's not a percentage in the fact that if we were setting up percentages, we would have to be specific. So 33, 33, and 33, we're going to let the browser determine the percentage by saying that each of these items is going to take up one part of the whole. So if I just change this to 1F again, I don't need to worry about what that percentage works out to be. The browser will figure that out. I'm going to fit, this is one part of the whole is 4, so I'm going to be 1/4 of that. So the browser does all of the work with the FR percentages, which is why it makes it a little bit nicer than percentages. All right, so we've set up 3 columns, and let's see if we've got 3 columns. In fact, we do. So now we have 3 columns of dogs. And if we make our window smaller, then we still have the 3 columns of dogs, and it's not very responsive, but it looks nice at least here. So instead of doing it this way, I'm going to comment this out just so we can see the progression. So instead what I'm going to do is I'll do grid template. I'm just going to copy and paste so I'm not all thumbs here while I'm typing. Grid template columns, and this time we'll just say, all right, instead of my having to define 1 FR, let's do a repeat. So repeat, I'm going to do 3 pixels for now, 280 pixels. Repeat 3 times. Each column is going to be 280 pixels. And the reason I'm doing that is because that's about how wide these images are. And so I'm going to at least try to make those columns the same width of the images. Okay, so a little bit better, but again, not optimal yet. I'm still not responsive, but we do have some things going on here. We can see that our wrapper is showing through now with our divs and so forth. All right. So let's make it responsive. Again, I'm going to comment this out just so we can see the progression. And I'm going to start again with this grid template repeat. And this time I'm going to use the word, instead of 3 there, I'm going to say auto fit. And so now the browser is going to be able to auto fit, or let's just see it happen. Now the browser is going to be responsive and it's going to do its best to not determine how many columns, but determine how many columns based on the best fit. So you can see that if I make this smaller, the browser is trying to, it's matching that 280 pixels. So as long as my images are 200 and there's room for 280 pixels, then they will be side by side. But as soon as the browser can't put 3 images side by side, maintaining that 280 pixels, then it pushes it down to the next column. Let's see if I can demonstrate that again. There we go. And you can see it's going to take place. As long as it can meet that 280 pixel requirement, then it's going to put it on that same line. Otherwise, it pushes it down to the next. So we're getting a little bit more responsive here. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do, again, I'm going to comment out this line and probably do a copy and paste again. So now we have the repeat. I'm going to go with the auto fit. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the min max. So I'm going to tell the browser that at the minimum, I need these pictures to be 280 pixels, no smaller. And then at the maximum, I want them to stretch out one part of the whole. Well, that's kind of hard to explain, but let me just show you the difference. So right here, you can see that before I refresh my page, this page is still reflecting this line, where each of those images are taking up 280 pixels. There's still some room here from my wrapper showing through. But now what we're saying is we need those columns to take up the whole space that they have available. And so we should see this yellow go away. So now when I refresh it, now you'll see that those divs are taking up the full amount of space that they have allocated to them. So at the minimum, they're taking 280 pixels, but otherwise they're going to take up that full fractional one part of the whole. In this case, the whole is the whole width because we don't have anything else described there. And now if we make this smaller, whoops, wrong one, make this window smaller, we should see the same behavior. So now you can see that the div is taking up the entire width and the wrapper is no longer showing through. And then we can continue to go on through and see how that's working. All right, so let's do a little bit more adjustment here. I'm going to adjust the rows. So I'm going to do grid, auto, rows. So I'm going to set a default for the height of the rows. And I'm start off with 200 pixels just to see how that works. So I'm saying what is the default of these heights? Right now the heights are taking up whatever the content is, but I'm going to redefine that. So now all of these are taking up exactly 200 pixels in height. The other option to this would not be pixels, but I'm going to say auto fit. So that would enable them to try to fit it according to the highest image in that particular row. Okay. And then maybe we'll do one other thing to finish this, to wrap this up. We'll do a grid gap. So we're going to put a gap between all of our images. And so then we should see the yellow coming through with the gap. So the 20 pixel gap in between. And let's see if we can then adjust it accordingly. So now you see that gap in between. All right. So now we've got a very responsive image gallery that we hardly had to write any code for.